Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all participants joining us from different locations. Welcome to this session dedicated to accelerating innovation in transport, a session in the framework of the Asia Pacific Transport Forum of this year by the Asian Development Bank. The premise of this session is that innovations in transport are needed to deliver the widespread decarbonization of transport systems that is required to address the climate emergency, as well as to respond to pandemic-era needs, ensuring access to transport and mobility for all. During this session, speakers will debate what is innovation in transport and illustrate recent innovative developments and measures, particularly in urban mobility, in public transport and in rail. My name is Marusha Cardama. I am the Secretary General of SLOCAT, the International Multi-Stakeholder Partnership on Sustainable Low-Carbon Transport. And I would like to thank the Asian Development Bank for this opportunity of being here with you today. In SLOCAT, we work to galvanize the movement for sustainable low-carbon transport and bring its voice to global processes on sustainability and climate. That means that in our day-to-day, we are very often confronted to conversations about innovation in our sector. There are some questions that we recurrently see emerging in these debates. What is meaningful innovation in transport today? What is preventing innovation from being deployed at scale? How do we ensure that innovative solutions respond to the specific challenges and opportunities of a given city, of a given region, and it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach? Are we sufficiently harnessing the innovation that is flourishing around informal transport in many cities in the Global South? How is the digital revolution impacting transport for both passengers and freight and the social behaviors that underpin transport demand? Is it all about a technology revolution? What about social innovation? What are the enabling conditions for fostering public and private partnerships towards innovative solutions that deliver on public policy goals for transport? These are some of the questions that we face, and interestingly, they unfold against the backdrop of Asia experiencing the highest increase in transport CO2 emissions among world regions over the past decade. It's also very noticeable that 4 of the world's 5 most congested cities in 2019 were in Asia. We should not forget either that electric 2-wheelers are completely changing the face of transport and energy demand across Asian cities. But fundamentally, what we cannot forget is that barriers to access to mobility are prevailing. In the second edition of the Global Status Report from SLOCAT on transport and climate change, we found that still today, more than half of urban residents in the Global South are needing to travel much more than 60 minutes to access jobs and services. The Asian Transport Outlook by the Asian Development Bank has actually brought that figure down to the Asia Pacific region, and they tell us that 61% of urban residents are lacking access to urban public transport. That is 1 billion people in the region not having access to public transport, despite the recent growth in transport capacity in the region. To help us set the tone, we are honored to count among us today with Katja Schöckner. She's a visiting scholar at the MIT Sensible City Lab, and she's going to really kick us off and make us think a lot about what to mean by innovation, while sharing with us very relevant examples of what is going on in different places of the world. Over to you, Katja, please.
Good morning, good evening to Manila. Thank you, Marusha, very much for this kind introduction. It's so lovely to be back in Manila and at the Transport Forum, albeit digitally. I will present today a few innovations and ideas that come from MIT and look into the future, but I've actually chosen also innovations that come from the global south and have been native to the global south and can inform transportation globally, because I'm a big believer in actually all the new things and the innovation that happens in Asia itself. Michelle, could you please bring on the next slide? So my talk today would be about how to make data, tech, and transport work. Next slide. And as I said before, while I will show sometimes innovations or even crazy ideas, this is not a transport talk for utopia, but this is a transport talk for actually better mobility, better accessibility, and things that you can and use within the next 5 to 10 years in Asian cities. Next slide, please. So we'll be talking about 3 things. First, about planning tools that allow you to bring experts, politicians, and citizens together when planning or discussing new plans, because that helps solving conflict. I will also be talking about transport logistics and goods traffic that employs data, trucks, and people to get the goods moving. And finally, a topic that's dear to my heart, and I've heard Marusha introducing and saying how important it is, which is informal transport or rickshaw transport, and how we think about developing the rickshaws of the future. Next slide, please. So first and foremost of all, the interactive planning tools. What you see here is work from the MIT Media Lab in the City Science Group under the direction of Kent Larson, and it's called the Cityscope. What you do see here is that it is actually a 3D model, very quickly built with Lego to reflect the actual city, and then light is projected on it. But this light is not only beautiful, this light is actually linked, intrinsically linked to simulations, and can, when you change something in the model, take something out, put something back in, very quickly adjust and say, what impact does that have on transportation? How many more people would be coming there if you put a skyscraper or such? So those interactive planning tools allow experts, politicians, and citizens to interact intuitively. They bring, and that's crucial, together local and global expertise and combine tangible modes people are used to play with. Lego, they are used to play, and hardly, whenever we have someone in, they can hardly stop touching and wanting to move something on the 3D plan with digitally and database solutions, because you would immediately see the impact of your planning decisions based on the simulations and the light projections, and it can help solve conflicts. Next slide, please. What we also do is we pair this tangible model with the light projections and the simulations with a digital visualization in the background to make sure that you can also look and see and give even another overlay of information on top of the digital model. Next slide, please. And I'm not talking about the future only. This is actually a working planning tool that has been used by different partners at MIT Media Lab. What you see here is Riyadh, where we looked at the walkability during different daylight hours. And of course, that means different temperatures, heats, and shadow. Next slide, please. But it's not only has been used in Riyadh and many other cities globally. What we also learned is, while this model that gives you an overview of your planning area is sometimes not enough. It has been paired with actually a digital screen that you might have seen by commercial offers before, where you can move around a table and see the larger regional impacts. And as people do care about the local scale, you see a street scale model as well that gives you details, because people care where the BRT station in front of their houses are or not. Next slide, please. Again, you see this paired with digital screens and interacting screens. Next slide. And those screens then give you actually targeted information for transport. How much cars have you shifted by that intervention? How much less cars are walking, driving on the road? How much money does it cost to build this intervention that you just moved on your table? And also what that means for how many more public passengers actually can go through and CO2 emissions. Next slide. And as I said before, it was used to consider and think about bus rapid transit here in Boston for Dudley Square. And that was the grid scale, where we could actually also show people what the intervention of putting a bike lane in there, of having dedicated BRT lines versus other opportunities. And they could actually imagine in front of their door. Okay, next slide, please. This has, of course, not only been used here in Boston out of the MIT Media Lab, but actually this is now a working tool. It has become a working tool in Hamburg, but not only in Hamburg, but it is part of an UN Habitat Lab that uses this to actually very dedicatedly work with the Global South countries. And what you see here is when we went in 2016 to Germany, which had problems housing the many refugees coming in at that time from the Syrian war. And they met with local people to find and identify and spot on that table where people knew that there were probably housing opportunities or buildings that were open and where they would be happy to help and see infrastructure. Next slide. And this is also true for working with the international, for the Inter-American Development Bank for government districts across Latin America. Next slide. But I'm not only talking today about planning tools, as lovely as they are. We know it's not only about planning future transportation and making it better, it's actually about what hits the road. So transport logistics, employing data, trucks, and people. And this is really one of those projects born in the Global South, coming from India, I really truly love, because with data and technology, it improves the lives of people and actually also transportation. Next slide, please. What it is a relay truck service, which means a driver picks up the truck, drives it 400 kilometers towards one direction, hands over his truck to a driver coming from the opposite direction. They swap. The trucks keep on running and running and running and running and never stop, whereas the drivers turn home at night. So they go back the 400 kilometers, hand it over to the next driver. Those drivers run back 400 kilometers whenever a truck arrives. They can go home at night, which helps with driver shortages, and the trucks keep running. And the good thing about this is, next slide, because drivers need to sleep, but trucks don't. So what you have is a delivery service that cuts delivery time by 50 to 70%, because the trucks are always running in this relay service. It cuts the cost by 30 to 50%. It lets the truck drivers, and it's even in India very difficult to get truck drivers because it's a job that takes you so far away from home. So it lets the truck drivers come home every night. And it is also a very efficient use of the trucks they're using to transport the goods, because the trucks are actually running all the time. Their investment amortizes faster, and that allows you also to quicker upgrade your fleet for, let's say, a newer and more energy efficient and more CO2 efficient vehicle. I think this is one of the lovely examples and case studies where you can see how the clever combination of big data, because of course this logistical ballet only works by employing big data, can work together with bringing profit to the companies and to the people. Next slide. If you want to see more about examples like this, you can see it from another of my previous homes. Not only ADB has been a previous home, but also the International Transport Forum, where we detailed more than 12 cases of transport innovation from the Global South. including drones, including informal transportation, including great mobile payment systems. Next slide, please. Well, and finally, the last thing that I want to show to you is, as I said, very dear to my heart, and that small scale, agile, and often informal transportation, and that's how we develop the rickshaws of the future. Next slide, please. What you see here is a tricycle that's going autonomously. So it's not only going autonomously, driving autonomously on the streets, it's a prototype, obviously, again, from the City Science Group under the direction of Michael Lin as a lead designer. It's also electrified, and it is a prototype that has a lot of sensors. You can, of course, not only have it run automatically and self-driving and on an electric engine, but you can also pedal it when you want to go someplace. Why did we even think about the crazy thing like having self-driving rickshaws? Well, one of the most difficult things is in Western countries to find rebalancing options. So when a lot of people who can, let's say, use the rickshaw for themselves to go to work, back, whatever they need, little shopping they need to do, they need to go back and forth. But in the morning, of course, a lot of people go in one direction and then they need to drop it off. With rickshaws or tricycles, that's a little bit more bulky than bikes. So you have to think, could they rebalance themselves? Could you use them to go back at a certain point and go to the next pickup where someone probably calls for them? Or could they autonomously run and transport packages back and forth when it's not used to transport people? And this is the thinking behind it. And this is why we put tons of sensors and why Michael Lin worked really hard to make sure that all the self-driving technology that's already difficult to build in cars is actually lightweight enough and clever enough for rickshaws or tricycles. And the good thing about it too is as they go slower, as they are lighter, as they are more flexible, they not only use less space than cars, less emissions, produce less emissions than cars or so, but also many of the extreme safety features that we need to build into cars because cars go fast. We can make sure that this and the impact here is lower. Next slide, please. However, while we are thinking here really about the crazy future tech, imagine self-driving rickshaws on the city streets of my beloved Manila, but also in Vientiane, in Laos, or in any of your cities. What the same designer, together with Asian Development Bank and some other fantastic local experts, built was the ADB pedicab that has been deployed in Nepal. And I know there is some thinking about this too. And it is not a small market that we are talking about because the electrification of three-wheelers, as crazy it might sound for you to build a self-driving tricycle, is a massive scale in the global south. There's more than 50 million electric free vehicle in the world. Most of these are in China, but even in India, 11,000 new vehicles hit the country's roads every month. So this is a huge potential to make the life of the drivers better once they want to use it, because you have electric assist. And if you want to think further in the future, when we would probably not need so many drivers anymore, then you could have self-driving vehicles. So it's an innovation that works both in a more low-tech implementation tailored to the local mobility culture, but still with electric assist for the drivers in the global south. But it's a great inspiration to make actually the transportation in the global north also better, because here it is getting worse and we are using more and more SUVs to drive around. And to give you one final mind-blowing number from the International Energy Agency, if all the SUVs in the world combined were a nation, they would be the 6th largest polluting and CO2 emission country in the world. And this is mind-blowing, and this is why I very, very, very strongly advocate for smaller, lighter, electrified vehicles. Thank you very much. Next slide. Because after all, we're all working in transportation. There's one important thing. First, we imagine the future, and then we make it so. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the discussion with my lovely other colleagues and experts that I'm really, really looking forward to, even to see just on screen. Thank you very much.
Wow, Katja, thank you. Thanks ever so much. If we were in a room, you know, I'm pretty sure that it would be a stunned innovation here. You've been really, really giving us fascinating figures and reflections. Not only the shocking figures that are really food for thought, and make us, and it should make us think as well, what is the paradigm of transport, isn't it, that we want to see unfold, and is it just motorized transport, but also all the thinking and how you help us demystify aspects such as big data. How does it actually get applied? I particularly appreciated how much you put people at the center, and how much you put that notion of creativity, not being risk averse. You talk about interacting intuitively. Wow, it almost sounds like completely the contrary of what you expect governments to do or big financiers to do, isn't it? That interactive, an intuitive interaction. So thank you very much. You've certainly set the tone. And that also allows me to remind our participants to please start thinking about questions and answers. We want to see really that Q&A function there being heavily populated. I'm pretty sure that this has already excited a lot of thought in your heads. But now is my opportunity really to introduce the amazing panel that we've got. So this is when all our panelists go on camera, and we are really spoiled. You're going to see that we have quite a treat here. We're going to be having many different perspectives from the private sector, and others, and also from public transport, and from the urban perspective in particular. We are counting with us Fayaz Khan, who is the CEO of Transport Peshawar in Pakistan. We have as well, in a pre-recorded statement, because he couldn't join us today due to another commitment, François Daben, who is the Secretary General of the International Union of Railways, UIC. With us is Sylvain Aon, who is the Senior Director for Strategy in the International Union of Public Transport, UNTP. And last but not very least at all is Sasank Venui, who is the head of the Global Secretariat of Mobilize Your City, who is also part of the ABB family, clearly, after so many years of being part of those teams as well. So we're gonna keep on going with very specific and very concrete measures that are happening on the ground. And this is going to be our opportunity to learn about the Peshawar BRT project, thanks to having Fayaz with us here today. And watch out, participants, because this is the award-winning BRT project that everybody's talking about. So it's really an opportunity to get to know a bit more about it. We're gonna get started with a video, isn't it? To go a bit through some of the aspects, and then we're going to be able to listen to Fayaz with attention. So over to the controls to make sure that we get started then. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. This is Fayaz Khan, CEO of Trans-Peshawar. I hope you can see the presentation on screen, Marusha.
Perfectly so, but we cannot see it on presentation mode, Fayaz. We can see all the slides, so perhaps you would like to click on the presentation so we go to presentation mode. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Today, it's indeed a great honor for me to present the Peshawar BRT case study at this Asia and the Pacific Transport Forum 2022. Basically, Peshawar BRT project is not only running buses, but the aim of the project, the objective was to develop a sustainable urban transport system for the city of Peshawar that is in line with the government of Pakistan vision. And some key outputs of the project that I want to share with you is to construct a resilient infrastructure that supports environmental friendly BRT system, capacity building, and having an integrated model so that all modes of transportation support each other and all modes are integrated, and to encourage the transit-oriented development. Our vision for Peshawar BRT was to provide a safe, efficient, inclusive, and environmentally friendly BRT system, and that we made possible by ensuring that the system is 100% universally accessible. We are running the system efficiently by having predefined key performance indicators that we monitor strictly. Safety was built into the design construction and now in operation, and we continuously do trainings to ensure that the operations are running in a safe manner. And all this is done in environmentally friendly manner. And the key that I want to mention is that we procured diesel hybrid buses, which is first time in Pakistan. And also we encourage non-motorized traffic. Some key features of the Peshawar BRT that I want to share. It is a gold standard BRT. We are the first city in subcontinent to be gold standard. The name of the system is Zoo Peshawar, which is a local word, and it means let's go Peshawar. And it's a third generation BRT system. Some physical components of the project include 27 kilometers of fully dedicated end-to-end corridor, 30 stations that are spaced based on international standards, around 900 meters apart. In total, we will be having 244 buses. We are having 2 bus depots at the end, 3 plazas, which include park and ride facilities and commercial to have some non-fare revenue as well to attract some passengers who want to come in the cars and park their vehicles and then continue their journey in the buses. We are running 10 routes and we focus on NMT as well. We are having a good system of sidewalks and a bicycle sharing system in which we offer 360 bicycles. Some key operational stats of the project. The peak ridership we have experienced is 267,000 per day. We have unique users of over 1 million, and that means that every 4th citizen of the greater Peshawar is our commuter. We have a distance-based fare system, and the government decided to keep the fare very low because we started in pandemic, and it was the vision of the government of Pakistan to keep low burden on the people. So the fare were very low to begin with. We are at the moment running 158 buses, multiple routes, express, direct routes, stopping route. And the routes, one of our strength is the routes are basically we have developed based on the customer demands and based on the passenger demand. And that is one of the reason for popularity of our system. Something that we are proud of, that the female employment in pre-BRT, there are basically absolutely no females, and we have raised from 0 to 10% of our employees in the BRT are female. The female ridership, which is again a great achievement, from 2% because the preconditions were not good for the females, and we have reached to 20%. The passenger per hour per direction is about 10,000, and from a safety perspective, we are proud to say that we have moved 80 million passengers without any injury. Some innovations that I want to share that we adopted in BRT is basically the hybrid electric buses. And during the planning and in the initial stages, there was a little bit reluctance of this from some of the decision makers, because this was the first time and there was some risk involved. But Peshawar BRT, and in this one, I want to mention that the credit goes to Asian Development Bank, their technical team who supported us in this, and we ensured that we bring the hybrid electric buses. And we have now set the baseline in the country, and other systems are now following us. Another innovation was we have ensured no other system in Pakistan is fully universal accessible. So this is a fully universally accessible system. Then again, a new innovation, the bus industry restructuring program, that what we do with the old transport system. So basically we added them to, we provided them employment opportunity in the system. At the same time, we are scrapping the old buses. So at the moment, we have already scrapped 350 buses and 200 more buses which are obsolete, which are not, which are resulting in pollution and which are unsafe. We are scrapping those. So they, after the BRT, they do not move to any other part of the city. Then the bicycle sharing system, first of its nature in Pakistan, that we are running. And we have a fully dedicated helpline and information center that is all the time available for passenger to instantly resolve the passenger complaint and help them. Then passenger awareness and community participation is the key strength of our project. And I will, in the next slide, I will share with you further details. Then using the digital age, we are providing free Wi-Fi in the stations, in the buses, to make the journey more comfortable for them. And first time in Pakistan, we have provided mobile application where the buses could be monitored, where someone can pay through the mobile app in a contactless manner. Just to show you some photos of the pre-existing conditions, how was the transport? And it was impossible for the elderly, for the females, for the small kids to use this transport. And the average speed based on our service was under 10 kilometers per hour. After the BRT, there is a huge change in the dynamics of the city. We were able to provide a safe and efficient transport system that is reliable, and people have trust in this system. One of the key strengths and based on the passenger demand was to provide a safe and secure system to the people. So we have fully dedicated surveillance team, we have the quick response unit, and we have a control center where we monitor all the situation through cameras. We are running anti-harassment campaigns in the system, and that was very important because of the female ridership and demand. We engaged with them, and they needed basically a safe and secure environment. And it was very important to raise awareness in the general public about the anti-harassment, to inform the people about the laws. And we created several knowledge centers at various stations where we provided the females about their rights, about the way how to complain, and give them the tools what to do in case of harassment. Passenger information is key. In the beginning, when we were starting the system, there was a lot of criticism that these people, it's a new system, people will not be familiar with it. But with a good information system, with awareness campaign, with easy to understand videos, we were able to disseminate the information in a good manner that people understand our system and they adopt to it. One of the key strength of our system is the kids. Prior to BRT, it was impossible for the small children to go in public transport. Now the BRT has provided opportunity that even the early primary school level kids, they come and they use our system because they have the confidence without any adult with them, without any support with them, and they are using it safely. Again, female, the key strength of our Peshawar BRT, where we were able to increase the ridership from 2% to well over 20%, and the demand is even growing, and there is more and more demand, and we are now adding more buses to the system based on the female demand. We have recently done a survey in which female shows a great appreciation, and they wanted to have more capacity provided for the females. Then universal accessibility, an important feature of our project. Our project is 100% universal accessible, not only the BRT corridor, but also the off corridor. We have provision. And before the BRT, it was impossible for the people with disabilities to use a public transport. They had to rely on private taxis, and those were very expensive because even the private taxis could not accommodate the wheelchairs. So we have been a game changer for the people with disabilities. Another important factor was the transgender In Pakistan, basically transgender, they were not welcome. They were not it was impossible for them to use public transport due to harassment, and taxis were a very costly alternative. So for the first time in history of Pakistan, we have provided priority seats for transgender to include them, because our BRT is for all, and we do not want to leave anyone out from the use of BRT. Then important for running efficient and good BRT is to maintain the infrastructure in good shape. So that's our motive. We continuously keep the O&M as per standards and strictly monitor it. NMT is another important feature of our project. So we encourage people, we do the bicycle rallies, we invite different celebrities, we invite the locals to join us with their families and encourage the use of bicycle, because bicycle sharing is a new, so it has started to pick up, and we are hopeful that it will expand in the near future. Then we are not just leaving it to public transport and just running the buses and that's it. We basically want to work with the community, we want to engage, and we want to partner with the community so they develop an appreciation of the BRT and they work with us, they partner with us. So we work with the health department for polio awareness campaign, and we also provided them platform in our stations for polio vaccination. At the same time, we are working on the breast cancer awareness campaign. We do the testing of these testings in our stations and encourage females to take part in this to detect this disease and get rid of it at the right time. At the same time, we also celebrate activities. These photos are from the last Independence Day, and we basically invited females, families to come and celebrate, because in the city of Peshawar, there is no other activities that they can enjoy. So the people very much appreciated, and you can see in the photo that people came with infant, people came with small kids, and they enjoyed and celebrated. We are also working on a plantation drive in BRT. At the moment, we have planted around over 5,000 plants in the BRT using politicians. We are working with the different students and universities. They come and they take with us in these plantation drives. Definitely over the COVID, when the transportation for the public transport, it was a very challenging time. But when the government looked at it, is a very organized system, it is a very controlled system. So they allowed us to run during the COVID time, and we provided a platform where the passengers could be vaccinated, and where we provided information about COVID to avoid, and we successfully went through that time. We also work on beautification of the project so that to gain more public appreciation and to have more public-private partnership on that regard. So just want to show you the ridership data that we started with 1.6 million in a month, and with our continuous effort despite COVID, we are now over 6 million passengers per month. At the end, I want to share with you some lesson learned and the best lesson learned is to adopt innovation. We should not be scared of innovations. We should adopt innovation. Role and responsibilities has to be clear, and decision making has to be timely. Interface management is very important. There are multiple contracts. It is very important that the contracts talk to each other, they connect with each other to have so that they can be better integrated. Hire the right people and give them powers so that they can make decisions. It is very important to plan and give enough time to planning. Managing risk is very important. When you go for innovations, there are always risks involved, so those risks has to be managed. Finally, the supply and operation and maintenance of mechanical electrical equipment should be integrated into one contract, should not be separate to move it smoothly. And flexibility in design and construction is very important. Just in our case, we are finished with phase 1, but there is already demand for phase 2. So there has to be a flexibility in design and construction, so the future expansion has to be looked at. Thank you very much, and thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Fayaz. You're showing us in just a few minutes how to solve decade-long problems, isn't it? So I appreciate that there's a lot of things there that you had to share with us, and we really thank you for it. I think that is very inspirational to learn about a project, a BRT project that is very much anchored in this notion of integrated multimodal transport systems. And certainly I can only salute your efforts in making it accessible to all. Those figures that you showed to us in particular about gender, female employment from 0 to 2%, in the system, and the ridership you said from 2 to 20%. Certainly kudos for that. It's nothing easy seeing what you've showed to us, but as a woman I wanted to particularly salute those efforts. We're going to hear a bit more from all that I know later in the session, but now we're going to move on to the recorded video we have got from François Daven, who is the Secretary General of UIC, and of course he's going to share with us the perspective on railways. Listen carefully, because it's a super interesting set of ideas that François is sharing with us. Over to the video then. Thanks.
Dear colleagues of the Asian Development Bank, dear experts, government counterparts and stakeholders in Asia and in the Pacific, dear friends, I am sending our warmest welcome to all the participants to the Asia-Pacific Forum. As a partner of the Asian Development Bank, UIC would like to present the challenges faced by our economies in terms of decarbonization of transport, in which railways will play a key role. The driver for success will be to accelerate innovation in transport, generally speaking. Though, when it comes to rail, as we are already extremely energy efficient, innovation should focus to the way we can shift traffic to rail and public transport. We need to focus on the transformational projects that will allow to make modal shift desirable for our fellow citizens. It is particularly true in a period where the energy prices will structurally be increasing. With rail as a backbone, the region mobility system can transform the way we move. Not only rail is 6 times more energy efficient, but it emits 9 times less CO2 and reduces the number of road casualties significantly. On top of that, rail is the only mode to have reduced its emissions in the last 10 years. With climate action being more urgent than ever, the only way to halt the rise of emissions from transport is to shift more traffic to rail. An international task force came together with UIC as a platform to set a vision for railways in 2030. The vision gives the railway a leading role in the race to zero carbon and the renewables revolution. In 2030, we see diesel trains becoming a thing of the past, with electrification of main lines continuing and the use of bi-mode vehicles common in many countries. The railways will be the first mode to be net zero emission of greenhouse gas emissions. This is our optimistic vision and one that is possible. But there is a long way to go this decade to make this transformation. Modal share has remained stable for many countries. Change needs to be accelerated. We, the railway community, have many challenges as well as many opportunities. I will first refer to some emblematic railway projects in the region that are already happening. First, building up of international corridors, such as the Singapore-Kunming rail link in Southeast Asia. The China-Laos railway line was officially opened on 3rd December 2021, calling to the next steps of standard gauge electrified lines in Thailand and Malaysia, and finally, linking with Singapore. Second, double tracking and electrification of existing networks are developing. In Malaysia, it started about 20 years ago around Kuala Lumpur, and now this is almost completed from Thailand border to the Singapore border. In Indonesia and Thailand, similarly, electrification and double or triple tracking of commuter and regional lines around Jakarta and Bangkok are on the way. Third, more generally, strong development of urban rail network in major cities in ASEAN and also in South Asia. Over the recent years, are helping reduce car congestion and therefore are going to reduce the global urban rate of carbon emission. All these developments should induce a modal shift to rail in the countries and cities that are investing in these framing infrastructures. But for this new transport paradigm organized around collaboration between rail and public transport to become a reality, one of the main challenges is financing and the lack of pricing mechanism for the negative externalities of road, to name it. Often, the case is not technical constraint for the railway. The technology is proven. The issue is a financial one. Railways are well placed to take advantage of the various climate and sustainable financing funds. Railways investment return both social and environmental benefits. At UIC, for instance, we have developed a new tool designed to help exactly this. The Rail Sustainability Index is our new reporting and benchmarking tool. The online facility will allow railways from around the world record their contribution to the UN Sustainable Goals, the globally recognized framework for sustainability. By verifying the data and by issuing each participant a score, UIC is looking to promote railways' role in a sustainable future and help them to better access to sustainable finance products. One of the key questions here will be how to use carbon pricing for financing modal shift. Today, the existing mechanisms are suited for decarbonized transport modes that have a very significant carbon footprint, like, for instance, the transition for thermal engines to electromobility. Though, we all know that this transition will be slow, having in mind that the fleet renewal rate for the automotive sector is about 5%. One open question is then how to finance a paradigm shift that will increase the modal shift to rail and public transport in the next 10 years. Perhaps the energy markets could give us an inspiration. They oblige, in some countries, like France, the energy providers to collect what they call energy performance certificates coming from renovation work aiming at reducing housing energy consumption. This mechanism could be adapted for financing rail and public transport transformational projects that will be able to prove that they will induce a massive modal shift. That's something completely new that we have to think together how we will be able to implement. I wish all of you successful and interesting discussions, and we will be very interested in listening to the conclusion of the conference. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
And we thank you, Francois, for making the great effort of sharing this video with us and your reflections, despite not being able to join us today. I think, colleagues, the message that Francois shared with us is pretty clear, isn't it? Is this message of shifting traffic to rail and public transport and making that modal shift desirable to citizens. Very exciting as well to see the rail sector as a beacon of hope, that hope of seeing diesel trains becoming a thing of the past, and by 2030, the rail sector becoming the first net emission mode in transport. I think that also very interestingly, and this is going to probably come up in different moments of the conversation and certainly across the forum this year, is the innovation in the financial challenges we face and those pricing mechanisms that are going to need to integrate the negative impacts, societal, economic impacts, environmental impacts of different modes. I think that Sylvain, our next speaker, Sylvain Raon from UITP, is going to give us, of course, the public transport perspective. And it was interesting already, isn't it, Francois, to hear, Sylvain, to hear how Francois was giving us that idea of collaborations between the rail sector and the public sector. I just want to ask you, what do you think is minimal innovation? What is the innovation we are needing here, you know, and how much of it is about technology, really, from the perspective of the public transport? Over to you, Sylvain, please.
Thank you very much, Marusa. Thank you for the invitation. And indeed, it's already a very rich session we've had. Very interesting examples, illustration statements from MIT to Peshawar and from UIC. As public transport, I think it's in the background of what some of the discussions. the challenges we are facing right now are probably multiplied 2 or 3-fold compared to where we were 2 or 3 years ago. Of course, we've had the pandemic. We are working on getting out of the pandemic, and we have to recover the ridership. We have to get our passengers back on the network. We're still not there. We have to face a change of travel behaviors, which are very well explained in the region, in Asia, in the ADB recent publications. And that means we have to adapt the supply of our services. We have to think about our business model because of these changes, the costs are changing. So we need innovation for this. We have the climate crisis. We have the pressure to deliver on the decarbonization of the urban mobility system as a whole and of public transport. And we're working hard on it. And that requires electrification, for instance, of our bus fleets, to continue to accelerate and to find solutions to be as efficient as possible in terms of energy management system. And then we have the economic impact on the whole sector and beyond on the society of the pandemic, but also of the evolution of energy prices and of the current war in Ukraine, which has with various intensity, but impacts across various sectors, and which is bound to raise questions of accessibility and social inclusion. And so it's a race in a way. It's a race to be able to deliver the services which the people deserve and expect, and which will allow to address those challenges and confirm public transport as a solution. Because public transport is a solution, and we should not forget that. That means we need to secure the investment as they are planned, and we need to accelerate the deployment of projects, especially the one François was mentioning, what he calls transformational project is very important. A public transport mass transit project is a way to structure the environment. What we've learned also is that the governance of urban transport has also to innovate, has to adapt. We need to create some governing framework. We've seen the need for skilled and strong transport authorities. Whatever models is chosen, we need to have this governance framework in place, and we need to innovate for governance, because we have learned that we need to create more resilient governance framework in which we have a framework in place which allows to absorb shocks such as energy prices, such as the pandemics, and not systematically put at risk what has proven to be a fundamental service to keep the economy and the cities running. Finally, this sound governance framework is also very important to move towards tapping into the potential of unorganized transport. This has to be part of the solution. And when I talk about business model, when I talk about evolution of the supply, partnership between mass public transport and other actors, whether from new mobility services or unorganized transport in many cities in the region, are key. And what you can see is that so far, I haven't mentioned technology. Technology is part of the solution. It cannot be the only solution. You know, over the COVID period, the global emissions from surface transport fell by 36%. And that makes the biggest contribution to the total emissions changes over that period, over 40% of those changes. What that proves is that the strategy the avoid, shift, improve strategy, which is probably well known, is very important. And the avoid part and the shift part, which means planning for reducing the need for transport and the evolution of the demand with the pandemic can help for this, but also strengthening our efforts, as François was mentioning, to shift and to deploy public transport, either to shift or to avoid that a greater urbanization leads to mechanically to a proportionate increase in car use, are key. And for this, technology is only part of the answer, and it can only deliver if it can be deployed where there is a governance framework which is well in place, and where there are clear objectives in place. what technology, where there's technology for electrification. We talked briefly about it. It is both well known and further developing. There is obviously leveraging the connectivity of the persons and the goods, and when it comes to public transport, many of the passengers. And when you leverage this connectivity, you can improve the supply of service. You can build partnership for on-demand services, for working with an organized transport. But you can also deliver a service which is more focused on the citizen and the passenger. And that's maybe another type of innovation, leveraging technology so that to ensure that our business and our activities are really passenger-centric and are thought about the people and are thought about providing accessibility to all, and not thought only as structuring networks. I hope this answers your question. It's about technology, but it's not only about technology. And even if we have to work on the long term on autonomous vehicles, and I'm glad to see that the readiness index, some Asian countries are among the top countries, there are more urgent innovation, not necessarily technological, which could deliver.
Thank you, Sylvain. It certainly does answer the question, and I think it illustrates very much what is innovation as well in an urban context, isn't it? What type of innovation in transport we want to see in cities, with governance being very much another area, not just finance, in which we also need innovation. We are discovering certainly that it's all beyond technology. Thank you for reminding us about the avoid, shift and improve hierarchy. There is a hierarchy indeed, so we need all those efforts on avoid for as long as we ensure access, of course, and we need all those efforts on modal shift. We are running a bit against the clock, as it always happens, so I'm going to keep my comments here. I'm always very tempted, to keep interacting with you, because of course what you're sharing is very rich. But as we continue in this segment about urban mobility, we are going to hear from Sasank Vemuri from Mobilize Your City. I think that, Sasank, what you're going to tell us is that it's all very much about going back to basics, isn't it? And certainly the cities that engage in Mobilize Your City are trying to do so, and are trying to go beyond the technological innovation. So over to you, Sasank, please.
Thank you, Marisha, for stealing my punchline also, and also for the introduction. Maybe also just to start off with a quick response to, is it all about technology? So the ADB has been doing a lot of work on thinking about innovation over the past few years, since they've kind of committed to becoming a knowledge bank. And from what I can see is that they've identified sort of 4 areas. And one of the areas is technology, but of course there's also innovations on processes, on finance, and in ways of collaborating. And so Mobilize Your City is, and we think of ourselves a little bit as a knowledge hub to work on topics that can help promote innovation in urban transport. And one of the other things that came out of the ADB's recent research and publications on innovation is that we showcase a lot of things that work, but don't maybe talk as much about what doesn't work. So in my quick next 5 minutes, I'd like to also maybe talk a little bit about what has not been working, as much as I'm going to talk about what is working, so we can maybe learn from some of our failures or areas that we need to improve. So one area, this is, I think the technological advancements is really how we think about of innovation generally. It's one of the first things that comes to our mind. And of course, in the public transport space in urban areas, electrification and digitalization are 2 of still very much the vanguards of innovation. And I think what's working is especially the electrification part. So I heard from the ADB Transport Forum pre-events last week that 97% of all electric vehicles are in Asia. And so if that's not evidence of how much in the forefront Asia is in the space, that's quite an impressive number. But nevertheless, 1.4 billion people are still without access to sustainable modes of public transportation. And so that's an area that's not working quite as well. And collectively with the international development organizations and all of our other partners are trying to improve this supply of public transportation. But again, maybe what's not working so well is the financial products that we're using to encourage more public transportation. So the general mix that we think of are loans and grants, public and private, but usually it's some sort of combination of debt instruments, equity instruments, and and grants. And what we're hearing, at least from some of our other funding partners, is can you be more innovative about the financing aspect? So can you use reimbursable grants? Can you use guarantees and other de-risking instruments? So maybe two things that we can kind of learn from, and we need to innovate further. As well as we're doing on the electrification, we could maybe be doing better on the financial instruments. Next slide, please. And this is when I really say we have to go back to the basics. I mean, if we want to have net zero cities in the future, we need to have about 50% of our modal share being from active modes, walking and cycling through our cities. And a lot of our Mobilizer City works globally, so especially in our African member cities, sometimes 50% of the share of modal share in cities is already by walking. But as we know from Asia, which has had about 8% growth in private vehicle usage, private vehicle ownership over the last 30 years, as soon as people get a bit of income, they buy first the two-wheelers and then their cars. So what do we have to do to keep active modes really high? And I'm glad we've been hearing about this a lot from Sylvain, from you, from Katja, is the role of paratransit, informal transport, is what can we do to better leverage this flexible and currently existing resource? What can we do to capacitate them to access financing so they can upgrade their vehicles to be less emitting? So I think what's not working so well, I would say, is both in terms of the financing for these aspects. So how do we really ensure that we have equal investments, that we use, let's say, like cleverly use our investments in formal transport to ensure some, like as close to 50% of active modes in a way that's not a last resort, but really people's first choice. And what can we do to support the informal transport sector in professionalizing and decarbonizing? So last week also in the Asian Development, the pre-event to this, we heard about in Kochi in India, a really interesting pilot that's happening where informal paratransit drivers are being supported to form kind of self-help groups and cooperatives. And the cooperatives then collectively get access to financing. And so what we're seeing there is basically almost a replication of the type of work that was done in the agricultural sector during the agricultural revolution in Asia in the 60s through the 80s, depending on the country, where we have to think about supporting also the institutional frameworks to enable the access to finance. And so that's definitely, I think, maybe one thing that we should be doing better, is learning really not just from each other, but from other sectors. So we have these little bits of pilots that are coming up, and what we need to be doing better is also making sure that these pilots get to scale. And my last slide is just a little bit quickly about, next slide, please. Sorry, that was my cue for the next slide. The next slide is just two of the instruments that we use as Mobilizer City to support cities and countries in identifying and tailoring the right types of innovations that help them solve their local problems. So we call them NUMPs and SUMPs, the National Urban Mobility Policy Instrument and the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. So especially the Sustainable Urban Mobility Planning process, which was developed in the European context, we have trying to replicate it in local countries in the Global South that help kind of do these things of identifying the whole range of required investments, projects, but also kind of the partnerships and that are required for net zero cities. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there, but I think the important point for me, and especially kind of looking back at the ADB documents, is that it's not about just the technology. It's also, we need to innovate about processes. We need to innovate about how we're generating the knowledge, who we talk to generate the knowledge, and who's also part of the conversation.
Excellent, as usual, Sasank. Thanks so very much. So those blocks for innovation that the Asian Development Bank reminds us of, no? Technology, process, finance, ways to collaborate, and knowledge, you've just added, absolutely, which is across all of them, I would have thought. Thank you so very much, and certainly kudos to the efforts of Mobilize Your City, because if we have seen SUMPs getting out only of the European geography, is very much thanks to the work that you are doing across geographies in the Global South, you and the team, and of course the GIZ over the years. So now is when we all come together. We can see that there's a lot of questions coming up as well from participants, so let's make sure that we go a bit dynamic now and a bit, sticking to time in this second part of interaction, so we can, of course, then take as many questions as possible that we are receiving from the floor. And I think that what I would suggest we do here is that we take a bit of a deeper dive into the innovations that support better accessibility to all. It was certainly a cross-cutting argument and very strong call from all of you across all your presentations. And Fayaz, I wanted to start with you. You were making a lot of emphasis in your presentation. How seriously did you and other project colleagues take the accessibility of this BRT system? We've already seen, for instance, in the question and answer box, somebody asking, how do you actually make it happen with females? So what was it? Can you tell us a bit more about it? Was it just design? Was it more than design? You made emphasis already on awareness building and so on and so forth, but we would like to learn a bit more about how do you make it happen actually?
Thank you, Marusha. Basically, in case of Peshawar BRT, and I just want to share that the main success of Peshawar BRT is because our intention has always been that this is a BRT for all. Right from the onset, when we started the process, our intention was never to catch the existing bus users, because that was a given for us, that the people who are using buses right now, they will be definitely coming to us because we are providing a more safer, more efficient and better transport service. Our focus right from that point was how we basically attract the people who are using the private cars, the taxis, and the low occupancy vehicles. So we categorized 3-4 groups into that, and female was one of our key target group, that how we increase the female ridership. So in that perspective, we involved the female. It's basically a partnership with them right from the planning stage. Just I will give you one example. When we were ordering the buses, we made one prototype bus, and we bring that bus to Peshawar. We ask different female groups to come and have a look at the bus and give us comments that how they see should be different, what changes they propose. So those are like very small changes. Like one of the female groups suggested that the grab handles were at the same height as the grab handle for the male side. So they wanted it to be a little bit lower. Then some of the seating on the tire area were a little bit higher, so they wanted it to be lower. So those kind of things that involved them right from the onset was successful bringing them. Then after we started operation, it was not came like automatically that right from the first day we got the female ridership. It took us time, it took us effort, and we work on that as well. We engaged with them, and we have a helpline. So we started developing trends that what are the female asking from us. So there were 2-3 top areas that we had to focus on. The female are asking that in some cases the male people came in their areas. Some areas the male are blocking the female doors, and they wanted to have some more efficient resolution of their issues. So we focus on those areas, and we have a quick response team. So we mobilized those quick response teams. We trained them with the gender specialists, that how you will deal with such issues. Then I already mentioned about the awareness campaigns. So we started awareness, we educate the people. At the same time, we also penalize, like our intention was not to make the penalties were the most secondary thing, but we also started to penalize the people who are violating the code of conduct, so that at least the people are aware that there is some kind of a penalty as well. So all these efforts that we made, we have gained the ridership of the female, and that did not stop here. Like with the female ridership, after that, we have started to see a rise in the small children, like the students, kindergarten and 1 grade student going in the BRT system without like the support of the parent, without adult, because those females had the confidence that they can go securely, and they had the confidence that their kids can go securely. So these multiple efforts, like innovation, working with the groups, and then with open mind, try to continuously change and improve what the success behind this.
Thank you so much for really giving us a bit more of insight on how you did it. Again, multidisciplinary and certainly with many different aspects here. Thanks a lot. Katja, let me move to you now. Of course, there's no silver bullet, I'm pretty sure. But if you had to perhaps highlight a few innovative approaches that you see are really working in enabling accessibility for all, what would you say those are? It's a tricky question, I know. Probably the list is long and there's a lot of that is not working. But if you could give us a few, what few would you particularly highlight?
Thank you, Marusha. Well, before I go into this, I want to say an extreme thank you for Mr. Khan sharing his insights. I had a tiny relationship to the Peshawar system when we looked into how we could use satellite data to help planning. And I'm still fondly looking back to this part, and I'm extremely proud for my minuscule relationship with this project. Thank you very much. It's a fantastic thing, and especially as you showed how you think about accessibility for all. And with this, I really want to go back to my presentation. The key is to bring, as Mr. Khan has said, the local knowledge, the local of the groups you want to change their behavior, attract the public transportation to the design instruments, to the decisions, but together with the experts. We need the participation in this area, and getting innovation forward is not only asking lay people, but bringing them back together with the experts. And then of course, and this is what ADB can help with, and what Shashank so put out so greatly with the financing, the political will and the financing behind it. And this is, unfortunately, I always get asked for the silver bullets, like the 3 most important parts to make innovations work. And I usually tell them, well, you need 142, which is exactly what you also need, probably, or more. If you want to make a great cake, you need to have an oven and the eggs and the thing and the salt. So you need to bring many ideas together, coalesce, and then take a decision. And and at the time we are at, we need to have, what I usually say is every innovation counts, even if you have very small innovations that just help a little bit, like the Asian Development Bank pedicab. It raised its floorboard of the pedicab, so it was a little higher, so the pedicabs can also be used in case of flooding for emergency services. Very tiny, very small impact, will not move too many people, but when it's needed, it is there. So human-centered design is important for this. And maybe I leave it at this, because I would really love to hear more about from Shashank and the other speakers. Thanks
you. Thanks for helping me on that front. He's always a torture of timekeeping here. Sylvain, let me go to you and talk here about the operator's perspective in ensuring this accessibility, isn't it? Because we shouldn't forget about all the different actors that are there. So if you had to think from that perspective of operators, what could you tell us? How do they work on guaranteeing that accessibility for all?
Well, thank you for the question. Strictly speaking, from operators, I think one element is it's difficult to take the operators out of the broader context, whether it's governance or planning. But what is certain is, for instance, all the work which can be done on the resilience of the system is important, because we know that whenever services are going to be cut because there are crises, floods, extreme weather events, which are more likely, it's the most vulnerable populations which are going to suffer. So the protection, the work on the resilience is very important. The second, but that is not only to operator, I think the key word is partnerships. Nobody in our sector, and I'm sorry, it sounds very obvious, but it's very important. And it's still something culturally that people have to understand. Nobody will solve any of those main challenges alone. And I'm thinking about the unorganized transport sector. It's about partnering with that sector, with the authorities, and for the public transport operators, to find solutions to extend accessibility together. Again, none of these are not almost as equals. And it's a lot of awareness raising, lowering the fear, lowering the sensation of threat, so that we can tap on what is actually an existing system, which delivers services to help improve it and help work on the complementarity. And lastly, there is a lot operators can do of, and many examples have been given in Peshawar. So if we replicate what Mr. Khan just said, I mean, we could do a lot, but innovations which are addressing the feeling of security for a lot of for more groups, for women, for families, whether it's simple physical innovation, the handlebar, whether it's tapping on technology, which information about crowding, alert system, etc. And that's also a factor for accessibility.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sylvain. Sasank, let me prod you a bit more on the sustainable urban mobility plans, which you've been so central to in Mobilize Your City. So how does one embed that notion of accessibility tool from the very beginning, from the inception work towards those sums? Tell us a bit more, please.
I mean, we've heard this idea a lot through everybody's presentations, is the inclusion, the participation. I mean, the working with all types of people, users, but also levels of governance and from operators and on. But if I can also do like Katja and answer the question that I want to, I mean, I was thinking about, she was saying every type of innovation is necessary. And I think that was really an interesting comment. And there's, again, in all the work that ADB has been doing, they talk about the difference between the incremental innovation and transformative innovation. And I think we need the whole range. We need the incremental innovations like raising the floors, and we need the transformative innovations that require changing the whole systems. And maybe just like the question that I wanted to answer maybe was, how do we get to the transformative systems change? You know, like how do we fundamentally think about, in the case of urban mobility differently? And Sylvain, I mean, Katja and Faraz, everybody has kind of mentioned this, but maybe to make it a little bit explicit, how the sums can support in this is to think about mobility, I guess, as a service. So typically we have roads departments that are responsible for transport in cities. And so if you're the roads department, what are you thinking about? Of course, you're thinking about roads. And we had one great case, one of my favorite cases in the Mobilize Your City partnership with the city of Yaoundé in Cameroon. They had a roads department, as most cities do. And after the sum process, they had a mobility department. And they realized that our job is not to provide lots of paved roads, but our job is to make sure that people can get to where they want to get to in the best possible way. And that requires really a systems change, and it requires a systems change in how we think, but also how we finance transport or mobility. So the financing for transport comes from the transport departments. The financing for pavements or for walkways through parks maybe comes from the Ministry of Renewable, or the Ministry of Environment, or the Urban Development Ministry. And so we really need to come to think about the kind of the complexity of the system that needs to come together to ensure mobility and movement, or sometimes maybe even the lack of movement, you know? So instead of having cars with certain license plate numbers end on certain days, maybe companies with certain registration numbers have their employees work from home on those days as well. And so this is kind of like the big systems thinking that maybe we need to also kind of encourage for the transformative change to happen. And so I mean, every level of innovation is necessary. And we really, I think, do need to have the partnerships that can kind of come together to look at the whole range from the incremental to the systems transformation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I mean, you've seen probably there's plenty of questions coming in the question and answer chat. I wanted to perhaps prod us with one in particular. I'm hoping that also where participants are seeing that some of the questions they are coming up with are being already addressed by you directly or indirectly. But to me, there's one. Let's pick up one of the comments that one of the figures that Katja gave us, that 11,000 new vehicles hitting the road every month in Asia. And that notion that if SUVs were to be a nation, they could be the sixth highest polluting nation of the world. So one of the questions we had there was like, how do we disincentivize private motorization and move into non-motorized mobility or that modal shift? How do we also do it? And let me throw to you another question already in the interest of time, and we keep the conversation flowing. And I just want to see, you know, raise of hands, asking you to not really make it more than like the 2-minute maximum, and I'll be a bit strict on enforcing that. Second question being, we've seen it in the chat box. Is it all about public funding, or is it also about private bank lending and equity funds? And if so, how do you mobilize those in the right direction? So come on, show of hands. I saw Kaja already. I need anybody else wanting to say anything on this? Who goes after Kaja? Come on, colleagues, help me here. Sasank, thank you. So we have already two. I see Sylvain doing this. That's a hand, I assume. But yes, I'm gonna put you on the spotlight as well. So 2 minutes each, super maximum, because that's the most time we actually have got. And you might want to already include some of your sort of concluding remarks, if you see what I mean, in the way you present your thoughts. So Kaja, over to you, please.
My first love and my first education is as an architect and urbanist. And if we want to reach better mobility for all and less motorized mobility, it starts with land use planning, and that starts with transit-oriented design, that starts with then sidewalks and public transportation feeding to it, and that starts also and begins, and that has the pandemic shown us, actually being able to work from home so that we have less physical mobility. So we need to bring that together. But if we want to build better mobility, we have to have actual interventions in how we use land and how dense we become, like as an important idea in Paris. And with this, over to Shashank, because I'm very, very proud and happy that Bertrand Gallo from the Asian Development Bank made us be on the same panel after not seeing each other for 4 or 5 years. So Shashank, listening to you.
No, thank you. Thank you for passing it on. I'm happy that you mentioned the land use planning. So that is actually one of the areas that Mobilize Your City is now also trying to work on a little bit more this year. I think we realized kind of how important that those two issues are. And maybe, you know, in the sense of the concluding remarks, I mean, we're a transport initiative. We were launched as a transport initiative during the COP but Ministries of Environment. And so we can kind of see how already the different ministries are coming together, but nevertheless, we work still in this environment where in the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action that Maurice and I have also worked on together, you have the transport sector, you have the land use sector, you have the energy sector, and you have these silos in our ministries, in our organizations, and in our supernatural organizations where we're supposed to be coming together as well. And I think maybe sort of in the kind of the spirit of both partnerships and systems change, we need to be working, like insisting, not encouraging, but maybe like insisting and requiring and mandating a more cross-sectoral approach, because we can say we need to think about land use planning and transport planning, but as long as the ministries are structured that way, the financing is structured that way, it makes it really, really challenging. And so maybe we go from encouraging the incremental approach wherever we can, opportunistically in the ways that we can do it, but also maybe advocating and pushing for more this the systems change that insist on this intersectoral approach, because otherwise, you know, unless we think about every road as an opportunity for encouraging sponge cities that prevent drainage, you know, like really linking the sectors together, I don't think we're going to be able to achieve the results that we need to and the speed which we need to.
Thanks a lot. You're touching upon some of the remarks we are seeing as well in the chat function. We are seeing our participants talking about health, talking about renewables, talking about whether there's any window of opportunity right now in the current geopolitical context we are seeing. So certainly that nexus between transport, renewables, health, climate, it's something that we need to make operational, because currently it is not, whether it is in governance, whether it is in finance. Absolutely. Sylvain, over to you. Fayaz, then to you. Let's stick really to that 2-minute mark, if you don't mind, and that way, you know, we are right on time. So Sylvain, please. Indeed, we can.
Already 15 seconds.
Now we can.
Sorry. Thank you. I fully support what Shashank said. It's very important. It's very interesting for innovation. The successful innovation are the ones which have been able to think outside the silos. We don't have time to develop, but really, I'll just go back to what Katja said. I mean, honestly, land use and urban planning, and in this region where there is an opportunity, with new development areas, with urbanization, with urban projects, that means we have an opportunity to plan mass transit in a way so and the urban environment so that you reduce the need for the private cars. It's much easier to do this than then go to the next part of the answer, which is pricing the use of the cars. But we know it's difficult. We should do it, but we know it's difficult. If we plan well, we've gone some of the way, which, by the way, we've done very rarely elsewhere. So it's not like we have a lot to do, but I would say it's very important. So what Katia said, I think on the top of my list, and I would stick with that. Actually, I wouldn't go further. Pricing, congestion charging, etc. It's possible, but it's much more difficult. First, we plan well, and then we can implement those things.
I mean, certainly, first we plan and then we make it happen. It's interesting that somehow I think gravitating in all these discussions is as well the notion of the power of regulation, I think, isn't it? We are seeing how many cities in the world are really attempting that quest for low emission zones and even the ultra low emission zones, both for passenger and freight. And we see how difficult it is sometimes for cities to do that alone, isn't it? But how much potential of innovation there is in those kind of schemes as well. But Fayaz, you sort of have the last 2 minutes. So over to you.
Good, thank you. Basically, I agree with all the speakers, what they have said, I think all valid points. But I just want to share like some examples from Peshawar BRT that how we targeted some areas that we were able to reduce like motor cars. And one of our target area on the NMT was to provide a bicycle sharing system specifically for the university campus. And that helped us a lot because the ridership there is very high. We are providing this last mile connectivity when they at the dedicated corridor, when they get off the buses, we provided them opportunity of the bicycles, and the trips have reached around 1,000 per day. So it's a good start for us. So that means at least 1,000 trips we are reducing there. Then the other our targeted area is the operational plans that we have developed for the some of the residential zones. There is a residential zone with the name of Hayatabad area, and all these people are rich people. They have personal cars and they don't need buses. So we are attracting 50,000 people just from that area. Because of our planning, we are providing direct services. And with the direct services, we are also providing them the opportunity to give them express routes, a combination of a hybrid model. So they get a direct off-corridor direct service, and we give them a express service within the corridor. So we make them to reach the destination point very quickly, same as their car. So these are like, we should go like in a targeted approach. If we cannot do NMT, bicycle, all the in all the areas, so we should target some specific areas and start from there and then grow on that. Yeah, thank that's from my side.
Thanks a lot. So that targeted approach, absolutely. Well, colleagues, it's been fascinating. I can really only thank you. And Fayaz, I got to tell you that there's a lot of curiosity in the question and answer function about the project. So more information about, you know, how tricky it was, how long did it take to build the freeway for buses, how much money did it cost, who was funding it. So I think you're going to have to keep on going, you know, and sending more information to our ADV colleagues, so then you can probably offline continue responding to some questions there. But I really wanted to thank you all for an extraordinary set of insights that you've shared with all of us. I particularly appreciated how pragmatic you made it, how real you made it, and how much you showed us as well, how across the world, and particularly in the global south, the solutions are there and they are happening. But it's just very much about taking them to scale and being risk averse in all fronts, not only in finance, but in all fronts. For those participants who perhaps thought that they were coming into this session to listen to just technology innovation, I think we've proven collectively that certainly it's not just technology innovation. That is that technology, process, finance, ways to collaborate, innovation that we need, and that we need to do it in partnership. But there's still a lot to do within the transport system if we are very serious about that modal shift that is fundamental to decarbonize and to enable access to everyone beyond having to have a private vehicle. And certainly we also have to go beyond the transport sector, and we have to work with the communities of renewables, with the communities on cities, with the communities working on health, to make sure that we really maximize all those systems. I just wanted to thank as well our participants, because it's always very difficult in these formats, as you know, to keep an eye on the question and answer, but we've really tried. I've really tried, and I see that the conversations there have been very rich, and a lot of the questions are clearly telling us about the comprehensive nature of this of this topic of innovation, but also about the need of spaces like this one, the Asia and Pacific Transport Forum, which we are spoiled to have every year. So I can only encourage you all to keep on participating in the forum. There's more sessions to come and certainly much more to learn. So thanking you all again and wishing you all the best and wishing you a good end of the sessions in the forum. Seeing you very soon. Take care and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Salamat po. Bye-bye.
Very much. Bye.
Thank you very much.